Council chambers on this beautiful September 6th. What a gorgeous day it is. It's not too hot, and you know what? I love the hot weather, but I think my body shuts down after 28, so I don't mind this weather at all. Members of Council, there's an agenda before you. Just a couple of additions. Under business items, there'll be addition of 5.2, which is the cancellation of the September 12th RCM. And then also under number 7, closed agenda meeting, there'll be addition of a presentation regarding the APPS, the Alberta Provincial Police Study. Administration, anything else to add?
Not at this time, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor, motion please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move the Town Council adopt the September 6, 2022 Governance and Priorities Meeting Agenda as amended, with additional items 5.2, meeting cancellation, September 12, 2022, RCM, and number 2, 7.1, Alberta Provincial Police Study Update, FOIP Section 24, advice from officials.
Okay, thank you. Members of Council, call question, all in favor? That's carried. Moving on to number 3 of our agenda, this is the public input session. This is the time that we allow residents or anybody in our community to speak to Council about any concerns, issues, or just bring general comments to Council on anything that's not on the current agenda. Administration, has anybody registered anything?
No, Your Worship.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody in chambers like to speak to Council? Okay, see none, move on. Number 4 is presentations and delegations. Today we have 2. The first one is the Stony Plain Minor Hockey. So welcome. Again, there's a sign-up sheet in front if you can sign in, and then again the mics are very not responsive, so you almost have to eat the mic before it registers. So you're gonna have to turn it.
I can be loud enough.
Okay.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you for allowing us to come and present to you. It's a super busy time for us. We are on the ice right now, so unfortunately you just get me. My name is Miranda Niebergall, and I am the president of Stony Plain Minor Hockey. This is my 6th year as president and 9th year on the board. So I just I have had the opportunity to speak to you guys once before. It was when I was the director of operations. So it's been a few years, and we have just a couple things that we wanted to share with you in terms of what's happening with us as an association and kind of what does that look like moving forward. So first, I just wanted to say that we, for many, many years, kind of sat around the 300 mark in terms of registrations, and we have continued to grow, which is important to note that over this time, we have continued to grow as an association, and we have upwards now of 400 members. It's important to note the growth because many associations in our area, Edmonton and greater area, have been experiencing a decline in registrations, and that's due to the creation of a new hockey league that has started, and just really briefly, that hockey league is non-sanctioned, which means that it is not recognized by Hockey Alberta or Hockey Canada. It's a pay-to-play. It's housed here. We have a few teams here, but they're not necessarily made up of members of the area. So they can come from as far as Whitecourt, Mayorthorpe, stuff like that. So many associations have seen a decrease in registrations as this league has come about, where Stony Plain has continued to grow. Something that we, as an executive, are actually just in the process of doing this right now, is figuring out, we don't actually have a stated vision, mission, values as such. And so we are in the process of basically deciding that and branding that for us. Something that we know that we want to highlight is just that lifelong love of hockey. That if we can foster that in them, that's a goal, and we've achieved that goal. Do we want our kids to move on to play higher levels? Absolutely. We invest a ton of money into our coaches and into player development to take those that want to go farther as far as they want to play. Something else that has come about, there's been some pressure over the last few years. We've seen more and more amalgamation between Spruce Grove and Stony Plain in terms of sport. And we are one of the if maybe not the last of the dying breed that really truly is Stony Plain minor hockey. We have gone back and forth in conversations with Spruce Grove. Should we amalgamate? Should we not amalgamate? It used to be, up until 2 years ago, it used to be that you would start here when you were 4 years old, and you would play all the way up until you hit 15. And then as soon as you hit 16, we would send you to Spruce Grove, and you would play there for the last 2, maybe more years. So we as an executive thought, why that decision had been made almost a decade ago. And so we said, why are we doing this? We choose to live in this community, we choose to play in this community, so why are we farming our kids out eventually? So we polled our membership, and there was an appetite to bring the U18 back. So you now can play right from 4 years old all the way up to 18. And actually we offered it this year, we don't have enough right now, to U21, that you can play minor hockey through up to U21. It's really important to us as an association, and clearly to our membership, that we take pride in being from Stony Plain and claiming that we play for Stony Plain. We want to maintain that. I have conversations with Tom about this, where we want to be Stony Plain minor hockey. We don't want to be Parkland minor hockey. Spruce Grove and Stony Plain, we do own that name. We've had that registered for years. But at this time, we just feel that this identity is a really strong piece that we want to maintain. And so we continue to offer really strong programs, work really closely with families that need support to have their children play. And so on that note, we made a change, I think it was also 2 years ago. COVID had made this all a blur. We created a new board position, the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Director. And so that person works directly with families, and the portfolio includes things like female hockey. We worked really closely with the town. It was fantastic to have a designated female change room. That's not a closet, as many facilities do. So Glen Hall has a female dressing room. Part of the portfolio is the Indigenous Liaison, who works with the band to make sure registrations are in, make sure rides are arranged, make sure schedules are communicated. We also offer now inclusive prep skates. Many families can't afford to put their family or their kids into camps before evaluations. So right now, tonight, if you go over to Glen Hall, it is a free, there's no charge to the family, we work that into the budgeting, where the kids come and there is essentially evaluation facilitation, where kids are going through what will happen in evaluations to prepare them. So it's okay. So that's at a no cost to our families, and that's been something that was implemented last year and received with great feedback. Other things are bullying, harassment, pride presentations to our members, bringing in the sledge hockey team, and exposing our athletes to such events. To have all of this stuff happen, we have a ton of amazing volunteers that I do feel need to be recognized. We have upwards of 12 volunteers, we have 25 teams, upwards of 12 volunteers on every single one of our teams that make our association as great as it is. Whether it's running the prep skates right now, or doing the music, scheduling, washing the jerseys. COVID was a little bit stressful, obviously. We tried to be a supportive partner with the town in implementing what needed to be done to keep everybody safe and maintain that. And that took a ton of volunteer hours coming up with Plan A, B, C, H, I, J, K. The other thing that we wanted to highlight is we gave up the concession because it was the manpower that it took for us to maintain that just wasn't enough of a payoff for our membership. So we've since switched it up, and we now offer things as association-wide fundraisers versus the concession, such as the golf tournament, which thank you for supporting that. We host a U13 tournament in December, and then it's going to get off the ground this year. We've tried 2 years. The U7 Parker Tobin Memorial Jamboree in March at the end of the year for those little guys. I also want to comment on the importance of us giving back to our town. And so our teams, through the managers, are tasked with how are you supporting your community? And so there's things that, and they have to report that back to us. There's things such as shoveling driveways, food bank donations, a literacy drive, so things like that, where they're intentionally giving back to the community. Funds are raised at the golf tournament to give back to kids sport for those that are in our association. And then lastly, just to highlight, we joined a new league 2 years ago, so we now play out of Edmonton. So we used to play in the Northern Alberta Interlock, where we traveled the province, but we now play in the Edmonton League. And with the joining, there was us, Devon, Fort Saskatchewan, many around the Anthony Henday joined Edmonton, and it required the creation of a new league. And so quite proudly, we had one of our members, Jeff Wilson, was a instrumental part of the operations committee in the creation of the governance model for this new league, because essentially Edmonton Minor Hockey had been running Edmonton hockey for I'm not sure how long. And so there was some movement that needed to happen and some evolution in terms of policies and how we deal with things, and that's something that we were proud to offer someone on that committee who comes with that background. Last, we almost 55 years we've been a partner with the town of Stony Plain. We have a great relationship. I get to meet with Tom 2 times a year, pre and post season. You cannot find better arena staff. I don't know what y'all are gonna do when Bob leaves, but Bob, Wayne, and Brady, you need to keep Brady. That's your contingency plan right there, Brady. Amazing. Anything that we need from them, regardless of what time it is, they're responsive and absolutely fantastic. And so my maybe rhetorical question to you right now is, how can, with the dawn of the new facility being proposed, Stony Plain Minor Hockey wants to know how we can be a partner and supportive in terms of moving that along. I know William wants $1 million. I'm just short 1-0 right now. And we have $140,000 earmarked whenever the time comes to contribute to the new arena. It's needed. We have, as I said, we have near 400 registrants, and we get Glen Hall, and we have 1 sheet at the TLC. Spruce Grove has around 900 registrants, and they have both TLC, Stu Barnes, Grant Fuhr, and then their new proposed arena. So I know that we're not the only ones that cry for ice, but we want to be a partner in this, and as stated, we have earmarked each year to put funds away to this. So maybe in 10 years when it happens, we can we can do something. But that's our question to you, is how can we be a partner in that? That's all I have for my talking points.
Thank you for your presentation. Members of council, any questions for clarity and understanding? Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you very much for the presentation this evening. This question might actually be more for administration. You started speaking about the ice allocation. and the fact that you only have Glen Hall and then the one sheet of the Tri-Leisure, and yet the Spruce Grove, particularly with a new facility coming on board. I know pre-COVID there was discussion of regional ice allocation, and that was being worked on and it was starting to come forward. Obviously, Wrench likely got thrown into that. I'm just wondering, do we have an update as to where we sit with that? How is that going if it has been implemented? If it hasn't been implemented, when will it be implemented?
Your Worship, through to Councillor, Deputy Mayor Laurie. Update from staff last week. Yeah, a few staff changes happened with the City of Spruce Grove and also with the TLC in terms of who was the instrumental champion of that particular endeavor. And I also had a change in my area in terms of the lead champion. So yes, our global pandemic plus a few staff changes. It's just not there, not ready for this year. So there's going to be some work done this winter to see if it's viable for next registration. So there's a few things at play, particularly with the Civic Center and how that mixes into that conversation too. So a bit more nuanced than original when we just had ourselves plus the two Spruce Grove facilities plus the two TLC facilities. There's potential of 6 now, 5, 6 being on the map.
You good?
I'll add further on to that, thank you, Your Worship. It's interesting because when we speak with the colleagues in the City of Spruce Grove, their ask of us for phase 2 of the recreation center is aquatics, because they feel aquatics is the biggest need. And their, again, comments to us are, well, we're building more ice, so ice can wait till phase 3. And so I think this raises a great point in that if there's going to be ice built in the region, or in that matter, any rec facility built in the region that is going to contribute regionally, it needs to do just that. And so I'm hoping that we will see some significant steps forward on the regional ice allocation. I'm hoping that we will see that, because if that doesn't happen, then maybe that does have to play into our consideration and discussions as to what the next phase or what the potential phase 2 of our recreation center should be. Because we do have one sheet of ice, whereas next door, which is only double the population, is looking at 6. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. I appreciate that as well. I think one of the conversations we've had with the Civic Center going ahead in Spruce Grove is that they'll free up more ice time at the TLC for regional users, so which is Parkland County and town of Stony and Plain. So hopefully that kind of comes to fruition. So we'll have to kind of just play the waiting game to see how that actually works out.
Our only fear with that and potentially a regional ice allocator is they have to cap registrations right now. We are not in a position where we have to do that. We are also, I would like to say, better stewards of our resources in terms of we require our teams to do shared practices, which means we can get our kids on the ice more, and we have our coaches who are mentoring each other in that. So it's still the same number of hours that they're on the ice as our neighbors, but there's only one team per sheet. And so the concern, and that is a concern in terms of amalgamation, is for sure they want to amalgamate. We come with ice, we come with a surface, and we come with an association that is not maxed out. And that's a concern, that if it does go regional, do we kind of get swallowed up in that because we are the size that we are versus
Right.
them.
I appreciate that, and I like what your comments earlier about that Stony Plain has a very unique identity that the Stony Plain Minor Hockey wants to keep. And speaking about yourself as the president for the last 6 years, I'll have the opportunity to talk to the previous 2 presidents as well. And the use and the allocation of ice that we do have is far better than any other minor hockey program ever. So being able to, again, there is needs that are required to be addressed. And Stony Plain Minor Hockey has been a good partner to making sure that those needs are heard and shown to us, but yet not to the degree where we become confrontational. So you understand, you've come here to ask, how do we get to the help the next phase? And you trying to joke like $1 million. And then that was my joke as well, because I understand that there's about $100,000 in. I said, well, you guys have ability for a CFAC grant that we can't get as community. So okay, I was trying to figure out all the different grants and possible money that we can get. It's like, we can probably leverage that 100,000 to $1 million. So that does give us something to think about. And that,
Yeah, if we can apply for things, if there's whatever, however we can work together, we absolutely are willing to do that and want to do that. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions for clarity? I think Councillor Hansard, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Ms. Nybergall. How lovely to hear your presentation tonight. I really appreciate your stating for the world, our viewers over the internet, to hear that you've had, Stony Plain Minor Hockey has had a 55-year relationship with the town of Stony Plain. That's longer than I've been, well, that's almost as long as I've been married. So that's a good length of time. And I really appreciate your sense of commitment to the town of Stony Plain. I want to clarify, not pick on, but clarify just a couple of things though. Sometimes we find ourselves in a world where things are happening around us and we can choose to isolate, or we can choose to participate to a degree, or we can just jump in with both feet and run the risk of what you suggested might be getting swallowed up. So I think you've built some strength into your, not you, but your whole organization has built some strength into itself, that its identity is pretty grounded. And I think there's a lot of people who can appreciate that. But what I want to hear, what I'm hoping to hear, is if the right set of circumstances are presented and the right opportunities are presented, that there's some sense of cooperation, not being amalgamated, not being taken over, having a strong voice. And honestly, a strong voice isn't always about the numbers of people in your population. By virtue of the very fact that you've been in existence this long, you command attention and you have a right to speak, and you should speak. I'm very impressed also with, but don't be afraid if opportunities come. I'm not surprised to hear you say and others say that perhaps it's suggested, why do you need your own eyes? Why don't you just, funnel in over here? Well, that's not what you're about.
That's right.
But don't isolate yourself either. I'm hoping that your players have the opportunity to use the other ice sheets in the region. We all pay for them, okay? Particularly through the Tri-Leisure facility. Every resident, every taxpayer in the town of Stony Plain is paying for that yearly on our tax bill. So we want that to be known also as ours. And it's not always location of where we play and use facilities, but it's the fact that we have ownership. So I just want to sort of put that on the table in front of you. And also to ask you, say this. I'm very impressed too that I hear you say, we want to partner, we've put some money aside, that 140,000. You haven't even begun to understand what that can do, how that can multiply and become something most people don't even recognize. Our mayor sees it, and I'm sure others in the room see it. And I've sat on Meridian Foundation board when just ownership of the land landed us 42 units of seniors housing and a lot of support from our municipalities and federal and provincial governments. Otherwise, we wouldn't have Forest Ridge Place. So that little piece is not really so little at all, and it's good that you've put that aside. I really love the attitude that we want to partner with you, and I'm hoping that that means administration and others will speak into your organization's life, and you will speak into all of ours, and thereby we can come out with the very best possible outcome for these young players. Congratulations to you for surviving through COVID and everything else. And don't ever, ever give up your struggle to be recognized and be seen as worthy, because you are, and your players are. And it's important that Stony Plain have this identity too. It doesn't always belong to our neighbors to the east. Everything sport does not have to belong there. And we're going to make sure that's understood by building our community recreation center one piece at a time.
Thank you. I appreciate the feedback and the comments.
Councilor, any other questions? Purity?
No,
Comments?
I don't guess I needed her to say a word. She already said some very good things.
Okay. Yes. Councilor Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for your presentation. It's great to have you here in chambers with us. I think the thing that stands out for me in hearing you share today is, not just your organization's, drive to train athletes at whatever level that, that's going to take them, at whatever age group that's going to take them. But to raise good human beings. And you talked, quite a bit about, the organization's work with diversity, equity, and human rights. And you talked about opportunity for people in the community that may not be able to afford, camps and different programs, and making that accessible. And talked about bringing in sledge hockey, right? Changing the conversation around, perceived disability to a conversation around ability. And so maybe a little bit, I'm going to steal some words from Nelson Mandela. You may know who that gentleman is, but had some very profound words around sport. And as you were sharing, it really kept coming back to me, but it's this idea that sport has the power to change the world, in our case has the power to change our community, has the power to inspire youth, has a power to speak to youth, and has the power to break down barriers in so many ways that governments can't. And, in hearing what you're sharing today, that's what I hear as an organization committed to raising up individuals in our community that are not just strong athletes, but amazing humans. And I think your leadership in your organization deserves to be commended for that. So thank you for all that you're doing in our community.
Thanks, Councilor Anderson. Any other questions, comments? See none? Yes. On behalf of our community, thank you for taking the time to make the presentation. I think you mentioned some really key points there in terms of Stony Plain minor hockey. As mentioned, that relationship with the town of Stony Plain has been over close to 55 years. That's 54 and a half, I think, close to. But the minor hockey in Stony Plain embodies what Stony Plain is in terms of community, collaboration, and cooperation. I have many conversations with other users groups. Any new league or ice user that comes in the community, Ringette, Eagles, the Flyers, it's all about the ice time. 100% I agree, because you need ice to play your games, etc. But being that the Stony Plain minor hockey has that long history, you also have the largest allocation of ice time as well. In hearing from my conversations with our staff and other members and user groups, that you are there to embody the spirit of Stony Plain in terms of collaboration and cooperation. Many times I hear that, if they needed a playoff game, etc., you guys are able to shift ice around. You're also able to allocate ice that you were not using because something got canceled, and reaching out to the other user groups. So I think that's one of maybe the biggest differences between Stony Plain and Spruce Grove minor hockey. As you mentioned, that Stony Plain has been really good at kind of divvying up ice and making sure that works for us, whereas instead of just asking for more ice. So definitely we appreciate that you do represent us well, and we continue to have those conversations and about the next phase of our rec center, and hopefully in about 10, 12 years we'll get that third phase built and the double rink. And yes, we're going to leverage that $100,000 to $1 million and more, because we can do it.
Let's do it.
It's okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Okay. Members of council, moving on to our agenda item number 4.2 is the presentation from the Alberta Capital Wastewater Commission. So again, welcome to Chambers. There is a sign-up sheet, and if you can just introduce yourself to members of council, and you can start when you're ready.
Just give me 1 second to log into your computer. Perfect. So thank you, Council, for having me. My name is Kate Polkowski. I'm the General Manager for the Alberta Capital Region Wastewater Commission. Some of what I am going to share with you might be new for you. This might be old business. But I wanted to come and do a bit of a roadshow to all of our member municipalities, to which there's 13, to give you a little bit of information about who we are, what we do, and sort of the tale of Tommy Turd, as I like to say. So this is an overview of our network. We service 13 member municipalities surrounding Edmonton, including portions of North Edmonton and EIA. So we have about 190 kilometers of transmission main that come out to this area of the world, north, south, and service the greater member municipalities. Just a little bit of history. We were formed in 1985. We were designed and built by the province, and the assets were transferred to us at a 90% grant. One of the uniqueness of how we operate is we have a number of agreements with EPCOR that help us sustainably treat and transmit wastewater the most efficient way possible. So gravity is free. So whenever possible, we try and use gravity to our benefit. If that means the wastewater should go to EPCOR, then we have an agreement from an exchange of financial with EPCOR. But if it means it should come to us, even if it's in the city of Edmonton, that's how it happens. It helps maintain the rates as low as possible to keep things sustainable for all of our members. A little bit about the legislation in terms of how we operate. So we have 3 pieces of legislation that oversee us, the MGA, in terms of the commissions and how commissions operate, how our meetings for our boards, so we have 1 board member from every member municipality, how they operate, and we fall under that FOIP that communities fall under as well. The Alberta Environment Protection Act hits us in 2 different ways, for instance. So our operators are required to maintain certification levels to which they are managed under the Alberta Environment Protection Act. Our permit to operate in terms of how efficient and how clean we make our wastewater also goes under that particular act. So those are 2 different pieces that really push us in terms of how we manage the facility. And finally, from a federal perspective, the Fisheries Act, and that really is an act that I never want to play in. It only comes in when I've had an unintended release to a water body through a line break. So I never really want to be playing in that act, but it does oversee in terms of protecting the water bodies in the region. A little bit about our org structure. We are a very lean organization. So I have a board, one member from every member municipality. They must be an elected official. I report to them. And then I have 4 departments. I have my operation and maintenance, which are really my boots on the ground. I have millwrights, I have operators, I have I&E individuals. These are really the people that keep things functioning. I have my corporate services. This is how we get paid, how we purchase, all those pieces that really make my people happy in terms of making sure the system keeps going forward. Regulatory services is an interesting beast in itself. We do a lot of work with every member in that particular department. So I have a source control department in there, which works with a lot of the industries, big and small, in all of our members. So whether they are releasing a huge amount of wastewater or they're a small mom and pop restaurant that we're really managing fats, oils, and greases in them, these folks are in the field on a day-to-day basis, and they're sampling. They are working with utility operators or public works staff in all of our members to really help make sure that both our system's protected, but it also provides a service to the local wastewater collection service to make sure that they are not dumping things that shouldn't be, that really impact those gravity systems as well. And then my engineering department, they are really working at our capital program. They're working with your planning departments to see about the growth and making sure we are well situated to manage the wastewater as each of the member municipalities are growing. In terms of the governance, so as I said, we're governed by a board of directors, 1 director appointed from each member municipality. They must be an elected official and they serve independent of their council. We then have bylaws and policies which oversee the how we do things and the why we do things. And with that, we have standing and ad hoc committees for the board. So I have, generally speaking, for the first year, we have a board meeting every month, and then we go to about every 2 months. And then I have 3 ad hoc committees that function as needed. So from a workshop committee perspective, from an advocacy, and then from a performance management from the GM's perspective. We maintain bi-monthly meetings and an annual workshop to ensure that our strategic direction is sort of on the straight and narrow and kind of an overall vision for the board. The budget's always an interesting piece that people want to hear about. And about 6 years ago, we did a long-term rate projection from the capital program, from the asset management of what the rate would be. And we have been on that target rate projection since we put the data together, which is a fantastic piece. Right now we operate at a 1.42 dollars per meter cube, which is about 20 cents cheaper than EPCOR, which is fantastic. And our revenues generally equal our expenses. On an annual basis, we do anywhere between $20 to $28 million worth of capital, depending on the year. This year we had a few more line breaks than the previous years, so we will do a little bit more than we have in the past, and that was mostly due to a couple dry weather seasons, and then we had a number of wet weather events this year, which really did a number on our transmission system. From an overall very simplified version of our wastewater treatment plant, this is an overview of the wastewater treatment plant itself. We have raw wastewater that comes in at that top side of it, and it goes through our various tanks. And one of the really interesting pieces about our wastewater treatment plant is we do all of our treatment with bugs. So we don't add chemicals, we don't have to be really purchasing a ton of chemicals. We have different tanks that have different environments that just create these environments where these bugs feast on what's in the effluent, which is fantastic. It's a really neat kind of environment in that sense. And then we have treated effluent that goes out the back end into the North Saskatchewan. We use a good chunk of our gases that we produced in our system, so then we use it in our heating system, which is fantastic. And then we have an agreement with EPCOR from a biosolids perspective, so that's really the heavier pieces. Now, when I say solid pieces of wastewater, we're still at 7% solid, so really mostly water, so it's pretty watery solids. And one of the great stories about biosolids in Alberta is we positively apply our biosolids. So what is that? Well, we either apply it to agricultural purposes or land reclamation. In most of Canada, that's not the case. Biosolids can frequently be trucked away and landfilled, or they are mostly landfilled across the country, which is really a shame. So we have a really good news story in Alberta in terms of how we apply our biosolids. From an overall facilities perspective, we're the third largest wastewater treatment plant in Alberta. We operate a BNR, a biological nutrient removal facility, which means it's all bugs. So we remove the biological components, the phosphorus, the nitrogen, and the ammonia from the wastewater and clean it up. We have 5 large-scale pump stations that have pumps that are up to 700 horsepower pumps, and those are substantial pumps. They make me look quite small beside them. More than 50% of our assets are out in the world, so they're not actually on my plant facility. So I have a transmission operator that is driving the line on a daily basis, making sure that he can't see any sinkholes, and are looking at the lift stations on a daily basis. Right now, our replacement value of our assets sits at about $700 million. Like I said, one of the strong pieces of how this the commission operates is we really found ourselves on collaboration. My folks really see our system as an extension of each of our members' systems. Our source control is looking to protect your system as much as they are our system. We look to partner with EPCOR as much as possible from the solids handling perspective through our regional exchange agreement and our biosolids agreement. While the regional exchange agreement doesn't necessarily affect Stony Plain and folks out this side of the world as much, it does a really neat thing regionally. While my southern members, so the Leduc County, and Beaumont, their wastewater doesn't necessarily go to us. It hits the City of Edmonton collection system and goes to Gold Bar. They do capitalize on our rate. which is fantastic. So they pay the commissions rate as opposed to the EPCOR rate, which that's really the power of the 13 members coming together and having that together. And I really like this picture because it really shows the power of the wastewater treatment plant. So on my left, I hope it's your left, the raw influent, that is what it looks like when it comes into the wastewater treatment plant. And that final piece of effluent is right before it hits the North Saskatchewan. So really showing the power of bugs and what it can do to make that water pretty darn clean. I wouldn't recommend drinking it, but it is pretty good looking water at the end of the day. Our strengths are really reducing that load to the river, so we maintain that quality of water 12 months a year, 24 hours a day. A lot of that is our robust treatment facility, but also the work we do in the world mitigating what comes into the plant. We operate an EMS system, so an environmental management system, which is founded on continuous improvement. So my guys are really focused on kind of always searching and cycling around making the systems better, whether it's our safety programs, whether it's how we test things or how we work with our members. We do have a huge focus on our relationships, and then we have a full functioning laboratory within our facility. It's a requirement of our permit, and it operates under a 14,001 requirement, which is a really neat. We're able to troubleshoot what's happening in the plant. We're able to look at different types of bacteria that are growing that maybe shouldn't be growing that are causing us impact. So it's a neat relationship that our lab has with our operators. And again, just to sort of sum things up, we really do see ourselves as an extension of each of our members and how we protect the North Saskatchewan together and kind of mitigate what goes in there and kind of focusing on that collaboration. Are there any questions?
Thank you for your presentation. Definitely shows that you are very in tune to what's happening there. And interesting about the story about was that Tommy Turd. How did that get used, and how does that go to advertising and kind of education purposes?
That's a funny story. I've been using that since I started working with communities. So when I started working with a different member in the region as a part of administration, I had the tale of Tommy Turd, the tale of Sally Storm, and the tale of Willie Water. And it's sort of how I told the story to the councils I was working with at the time. And it's followed me. It started when I was in consulting working with a mentor, and it's just followed me ever since.
Thank you for that. Members of council, any questions for clarity, understanding, and comments? No? Okay. You want?
Sure, I'll make it.
Councilor Peshko, go ahead.
I'd just like to thank Kate for coming out. She's new to our team out there pretty much and has fallen right into line really quick with the whole situation that we have going on out there. So I really think that you do a fantastic job, and I'm excited that you're out participating in councils. It's the first presentation we've had since I've been on council. Nothing against the past individual. There was no push from the board at that time. This time there's been a pretty good push from the board to have Kate make presentation to council so that you have a better understanding of what really our wastewater is about and how it's functioning and what's going back into the river. So if you do have any questions, I'd encourage you to ask Kate, because she's very knowledgeable in everything she does. And she's taken our board in a little bit of a different direction that's going on right now. I don't know if you want to talk maybe a tiny bit about that, Kate, but
Sure.
Some of the opportunities that really are at the wastewater level here is pretty astronomical. So if you want to just touch lightly.
Sure, I can expand on that. I think that going forward, kind of managing our rate and having alternative sources of revenue is a key component to long-term sustainability. And I was approached, so I've been with the commission 1 year as of mid-July, and I was approached almost 2 weeks or 3 weeks into my tenure with them from an industry looking for reliable water reuse. So further treated wastewater that could provide a processed water to the creation of hydrogen. So fast forward almost a year from then, and we are very actively working with industry and with the province to turn our wastewater into processed water that I can sell for a profit for the commission and further sustain the rate long term. Again, we're still in really early times, starting the detailed design of what that would look like, but it does look very promising, and they continue to work very actively with us to be successful to turn wastewater into hydrogen.
Excellent. Thank you. Councillor Loyens.
Your worship. Hi, Kate. Thanks for coming. I was just curious, for people that don't know or are new to council, how the whole commission works and the plant works. I know pre-COVID they used to take students through the plant to show them the bugs. Is that something that the commission or yourself are still willing to look at for councillors or people that don't quite understand how it works?
For counselors, I would love to have your council out anytime to do a tour. I've had a couple other councils that have taken me up on that offer. So that is always open. In terms of students, depending on the age of students, it's something we could definitely talk about. I've had university guys out. We're pretty open for business in terms of the COVID piece. Like, things are pretty normal for us. So we are definitely looking to do that. One of the projects I'd like to do in the future, and fast forward probably 5 years from now, is really a virtual tour to kind of engage with the curriculum base so that kids from across the region have access to it, not necessarily just ones that are, a 10-minute bus ride from the commission, because I think it's a great opportunity to engage on the water cycle and really what is happening regionally to protect our watershed. But that's a future problem that I'd love to be able to tackle.
Awesome. No, I think that'd be great. Thank you.
Councillor Hanson.
How lovely to see you here. I can't remember whenever, even when I sat on that commission, ever having someone come and talk to us in council chambers. So how lovely that you're here. I wanted to ask you, the water that you hope to sell, for what purpose? Could you clarify that? Is that the hydrogen?
Yes.
So hydrogenated water for, who's going to drink it?
Oh, no one would drink it.
Okay.
So it's what we call purple water. So we have potable water, which is what comes from most of our taps. And then we have our wastewater. And then there's this middle piece of emerging water that's called purple water. It's not drinkable, but it's pretty darn clean. You can use it for different purposes. And that's what we would be looking to create. And it would be for processed water for industry. So heavy industry that needs to use it for different things. Right now we're working with a hydrogen company, but there's other companies knocking on our door that would like to take it as well, that just want that reliable quality of water that I can produce.
Okay, very good. Glad to know we don't have to drink that.
No.
Thank you. I'm a strong supporter of Wastewater Commission and all the other groups that we belong to about sanitary water, because I learned at a American Wastewater Conference in Dallas, Texas one year, that truly the only things that separate us from third world countries are sanitary water and sanitary sewer systems. So we're glad that you're at the helm out there and looking forward to seeing what you do to take the organization to new heights. And I appreciate your enthusiasm. Aside from the fact that we can all hear you very well, you have an enthusiasm that comes through, and it's really great to see somebody excited about wastewater. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Ann. Thanks, Councilor Hastert. Any other questions, comments, clarity? Okay, see, then I have a couple questions. You mentioned looking at a secondary resource, talking about the water and creating hydrogen with it. My question is there enough land for you to expand, to have another chamber or another facility where you can actually harness that and do that?
Yeah, one of the benefits to where we are located is we have an abundance of property that hasn't been touched by us, that is earmarked for expansion, whether that's for wastewater treatment expansion in itself, because again, I do want to stay a little bit clear of that and not impact the long-term wastewater treatment plans, because that is my mandate. But we do have a substantial amount of land that we currently lease out to user groups that is untouched, that is going to be used, a small portion of it, for this work.
Okay, thank you. And then you also mentioned a little earlier in your presentation that through the southern members of the commission, they get funneled into the Gold Bar facility, and whereas I think Edmonton's charging 163 and we're charging 143, so they have the added advantage of saving those dollars. You also mentioned that up north, we take some of Edmonton's waste, kind of like the offset. So then do we charge them at 143 or do we charge them at their rates at 163?
So the agreement that we have with EPCOR is the lower of the two rates is exchanged between EPCOR and us. So right now we exchange at our rate at the 142. The southern members just get a bill from me. They don't get a bill from EPCOR. So we pay the bill to EPCOR at our rate. EPCOR pays us a bill at our rate for their northern properties or their northern flow rate, and then they bill out their people specifically.
Do you know if the northern part of Edmonton that uses services, are they charging them at the 163 or 140?
They'll charge the EPCOR rate for sure. Yeah, they don't have different rate structures.
Oh, so they're making revenue off us.
They would have a consistent rate, yes.
Okay, so maybe that's something we should revisit. I think that's it. I appreciate the presentation. It's always good. I had my opportunity to go on a tour of the facility. It is huge. I think, as you mentioned, if I stand beside those pumps, I look small as well. So I don't think that's an issue about being small. Like the pumps are just that big. I think that's all the questions I had. So, oh, just one thing. I had a little highlight here. You mentioned that there is more capital projects because of the line breaks. And you also mentioned the fact that you have to work with Alberta Environment and Environment Canada for some of those. So how much waste is getting exposed to land when we have those breaks?
Not a lot. We are pretty, we know it's coming before it happens, generally speaking. So over the last 5 years, we have replaced or relined our high-risk pipeline areas, so near water bodies, under railway crossings, under major roadways, so that we have mitigated impacts to the environment. What happens during a wet weather event is the pressure in the pipes increase, and we end up seeing a huge chunk of soil, in essence, that hits our wastewater treatment plant. And that's our first trigger that there's been a wastewater break somewhere. What that looks like in the world is a bit of a sinkhole, so like a bit of a slump in the soil, and it's usually in a farmer's field. So there isn't necessarily an impact to the environment out in the real world. We just get a whole bunch of soil, and then we look for that. We keep driving the line. We look for that slight drop in soil, and then that's our cue to get a contractor at that location. And basically, the top of the pipe has dropped down. The top of the pipe has dropped down, and soil slowly sort of eroding into the pipe, and it's almost like a trough of wastewater is just flowing.
That's good. That's good to know. Thank you. Other questions, comments? See none. Thank you for the presentation.
You're welcome.
And congratulations on your 1 year anniversary.
Thank you.
You survived 1 year with 13 members of municipalities, so you have to be doing a fairly good job.
Yeah. And working with 13 board members is also a very unique experience.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate.
You're welcome.
All right, moving on with our agenda, moving on to business items. 5.1 is just an update on the Ombok Storm Management Facility Administration.
Thank you, Your Worship. While the engineering manager gets his presentation ready, I thought I'd take a moment to introduce our new engineering manager, Alex Chipley. So Alex is coming to us from a mix of private and public sector experience. We're really excited to have him coming on board. This is his first presentation to council, although many of you have probably met him by now. Alex has spent the last little bit part of his career with a local land developer, as well as working in local government with the other municipalities in the area.
Okay.
On to the business at hand. Your Worship and Council, our engineering manager has prepared a presentation for the Ombok Storm Pond update. Prior to him giving that presentation, I did just want to take a second to set up a few key points and maybe just give some overview of the project to date, as some members of council have have been part of this project since its beginning, and others may be rather new to it. This project has been to council before in different stages, from a preliminary standpoint of the initial notification that there was some movement happening at the site. It is since that notification the town has conducted some preliminary engineering as well as moving to detailed design and furthermore into construction. Since construction has begun, there has been some changes that we've noticed that was noted through the project that has caused a pause in construction, and we are here to present the issues that we've come across in the project, as well as the path forward that we see to present the council as an update. So with that, I will be passing it over to Alex Chepley, our Manager of Engineering, and he'll present the Umbok Storm Pod update.
Thank you for that, Brett. So as Brett, good evening, Your Worship, Deputy Mayor, and members of council. My name is Alex Chepley, and I am the engineering manager, and I've prepared a brief PowerPoint presentation update on the status of the Ombok Stormwater Management Facility, also known as the Ombok Pond, and activities since the last update in May of 2021. In the hot seat, yes. Oh, here we go. Oh, okay, perfect. All right. So for today's presentation, I'll be following these agenda items. I'll first cover a brief history to date, including some of the challenges the area has seen, and provide and then some of the challenges that have been provided for the design and the construction. I'll cover the previous design and why it was no longer viable after construction had started earlier this year. The new design we're working on with the consultant and the contractors. Next steps and ongoing coordination, and address the Ombok Off-Leash Dog Park and plans during this upcoming construction. So for a bit of brief history, the Ombok Stormwater Management Facility, the pond, was constructed in 2008, and ground movements were noticed along the pond's perimeter within several years. These movements were observed to be slope failures of the pond's sides and eventually retrogressed into the two adjacent commercial properties. With added concern from the property owners, the town commissioned Associated Engineering and Thurber Engineering to complete geotechnical analysis and preliminary engineering in 2018. Work by both consultants was completed in 2019, and their combined recommendation was to relocate the pond. Review of the scope of work to complete the relocation was deemed cost prohibitive at the time. The town requested proposals from additional consultants to seek alternatives to pond relocation, and SNC Lavalin was engaged to begin work on detailed design in 2020. Following design completion in 2021, which would use a combination of MSM and DSM construction methodology, the project was tendered and work began in May of this year. All right. So there's several factors that contribute to the overall challenges encountered with this project. First of all, the Ombok Storm Pond has poor soil conditions with groundwater table that's located less than 1 meter below the subsurface or below the surface. There are thick sand seams saturated with artesian wells, which is pressurized groundwater, and the area around the pond has poor drainage. These combined factors called for unique designs to address all of the conditions. Second, construction had taken place for only several weeks this year before an astute resident had identified garter snakes in the work area, leading to the eventual discovery of a snake hibernaculum. A hibernaculum is a den that the snakes return to on an annual basis to mate and hibernate. This discovery required investigation and assessment by Alberta Environment and Parks, and eventual careful relocation before construction could proceed. And finally, during ongoing construction, sand boils appeared in several locations along the pond bottom. These sand boils are the result of pressurized groundwater that flows out from the pond bottom through the sand out onto the clay surface that the contractor was working on. A combination of this subsurface water flow and high groundwater table can be assumed to be one of the causes of the shifting pond's side slopes. As previously mentioned, MSM, DSM, which are mass soil mixing and deep soil mixing respectively, were the first design considerations for stabilizing the pond side slopes. MSM and DSM are reliable, frequently used construction methods involving mixing soils with cement powder to produce a material that hardens like concrete. This concrete material would follow the perimeter of the pond where the slopes were sloughing and form walls to hold back and stabilize the pond slopes. During the initial phases of MSM-DSM construction, sand boils unexpectedly emerged and created damp, uneven, and untenable ground conditions for equipment to work on. As a result, this method of construction was no longer viable and led to design reevaluation. The current redesign has SNC Lavalin completing calculations and drawings on a construction method known as rigid pile inclusion. Basically, it's an improved design that calls for the driving of concrete piles into the soil around the same perimeter of the pond that the MSM-DSM method would follow. Additional components are installed behind the piles to provide structural support. The design is well known to the contractors that the town has previously procured for the MSM-DSM work and provides efficiency overlap between the two designs, thus maintaining previously approved budgets. The schedule we're currently working on has a design and drawing preparation by the end of this month in September, procurement and construction between November 2022 and April of 2023, and landscaping and cleanup of the site by or in June of next year in 2023. For our next steps, as the pile design becomes more detailed and information regarding material procurement, fabrication, and schedule is more certain, we will meet with the direct stakeholders, who are specifically those commercial landowners affected around the perimeter of the pond, and provide them with relevant updates. We'll also provide updates to our indirect stakeholders, including the Ombok off-leash dog park patrons, other businesses in the Ombok Business Park, and all the town of Stony Plain residents through continued use and updates on the town's website. We have ongoing project coordination through the redesign process as we converse with SNC and our prime contractors. SNC continues to engage internally with their additional engineering disciplines to refine the design, and we anticipate meeting within the next several weeks to review, approve, and accept this final design. All parties are aware of the budget constraints of this project, and the pile design is shown to fall in the same budget as the MSM-DSM design. We continue to emphasize seeking opportunities for alternatives and that may assist with financial savings. Our contractor suppliers have also been notified of the scope of work and are reviewing their manufacturing capabilities for the pile components with materials, resources, and schedules to meet our required schedule and to update their pricing accordingly. So the Ombok Dog Park is an integral element of this town. It provides a gathering location for residents and pets alike and encourages social interaction and recreation. It is our intent to keep the park open during all phases of construction and have highlighted to the consultant and contractor the same. There will inevitably be periods of time when the delivery of construction materials or equipment may temporarily create disruptions to park access, and we expect to rectify those as early as possible. Any schedule updates during construction and as milestones are reached will be addressed on the town's website, and if we anticipate inconvenience, our residents will be provided advance notice. So in closing, the Ombok Stormwater Management Facility, the Ombok Pond, has uncommon design and construction challenges requiring very unique solutions. SNC Lavalin, Central Construction, and Keller Construction are experts in their respective fields and have demonstrated confidence with the direction of the rigid inclusion pile solution. The project is on budget and scheduled for completion by summer of 2023, and I recommend that Council accept the update presented regarding progress to date on the Ombok Pond as information. That concludes my presentation. Thank you very much for listening to engineering's presentation. We'll welcome any questions or comments.
Yeah. Thank you very much for the presentation and the update of what's happening over with the Ombok Storm Pond improvement. Members of Council, questions for clarity and understanding? Councillor Loynes, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a quick question on page 3, when you're talking about the brief history. Our slides indicate that it says it started almost moving immediately. Your slide says it took several years before the movement was noticed. Can you just confirm which it was? Because
Yes,
if it
that
was
was-
immediately, you would think 12 years down the road, we wouldn't be.
Through your worship to Councillor Loyens, that was my mistake. I had the information that I was dealing with. It was just an update to the information. After having spoken to Brad, there was a lot of information that I was compiling at the time, and it was just an update to the information.
So it was shifting after a few years, not immediately?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions for Terry? Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for the presentation. Understanding the challenges that are occurring, as part of this project was supposed to be the investigation and consideration of repair for a storm pond at 28th Street between 43rd and 44th Avenue. Now that these challenges have raised themselves here, do we have any update on the investigation to the same or similar issues at the pond at 28th Street and what the course of action there will be?
Your Worship, to the Deputy Mayor, I'll answer some of that question and ask if our engineering manager has any further to add after. The anticipated plan, the corporate plan, was to move ahead with both projects at the same time. As we move forward with the tendering for this particular project was quite complex. We did have to do a extensive amount of tendering through pre-qualification that took a substantial amount of time in Q1 of this year to procure. As we move forward with the project and I got the contractor on board and started moving forward, we had planned to tender that out in late Q2. However, as these issues started to arise, town staff and the consultant had to adjust all their resources into addressing the issues as we found them on Umbok. So the decision was made at the time to put on hold moving ahead with the construction of 28th Street and put into a monitoring phase as of right now. While we addressed and understood more of the issues that we were seeing on Umbok, it is currently, 28th Street has not been forgotten. It is still we're still monitoring it. We are working with the consultant to create a monitoring plan from now until next year to move this project along. The design is done. It is, but internal resources were needed to focus on this at the time before we could move ahead and open up another pond and create these two projects in tandem.
Good follow-up, Your Worship. Thank you. So, in relation to the budget side of things then, so when you say that this project is on budget, does that include the cost of the remediation that will eventually happen at 28th Street as well? Or was 28th Street going to be a separate budget item?
Through Your Worship to Deputy Mayor, those are two separate budget items within the corporate plan. The Umbok Storm Pond is on its own within the budget itself, separate from I believe it's referred to as South Business Park Pond in the corporate plan.
Okay, excellent, thank you.
Councillor Meyer?
Thank you, Your Worship. And I also have a question in regards to the budget, maybe just some clarification through you to administration. So it says it's on budget now, and I also looking on page 37 of 43, budget pricing for contractors and suppliers is showing rigid inclusion pile option for DSM MSM budget. Can you maybe just slow that down for me and explain it in as clear as possible how it is we're still on budget? Are we anticipating to remain on budget, or will there be an update coming?
Through Your Worship to Councillor Mayor, thank you for the question. So appreciate the nuances that it's to explain here. So as the engineering manager outlined, the deep soil mixing and mass soil mixing design is no longer viable for this project. One of the few fortuitous things that has arisen is SNC through our redesign is that the redesign being proposed is familiar to the contractors that we currently have procured. So what that has enabled the town to do is enter into a somewhat of a design build with this contractor. So while we are canceling scope from this contract, so there's effectively money that they are not going to get for this work, this has allowed us to work with them on how to work this design within our existing budgets. So they are aware of our budget constraints. Those have been made very clear to the contractor and consultant of our expectations to work this within the existing budgets that council has provided. So as of right now, like as the manager of engineering has outlined, we are still working on the final details of this new design. Early indications are that this will be effectively it will remain within the current budget to do this new scope of work. We are currently working that forward with them as we speak. I don't know if the manager of engineering would like to add anything to that, or not updates with the contractor and consultant.
I do not have any updates.
That's good. Thank you. I appreciate the answer. Good. That's great. Just slightly unrelated, but through your worship to administration, is there? I know we have a business that is adjacent to this storm pond. Is there any risks to this property with these further delays, or if you could just speak to that?
Your worship to the council, Mayor, I assume you're referring to the business that's directly south with the most affected land on the south side as you enter into the road. Mm-hmm. Yes, the town has been in contact with them before during the MSM DSM scope of work. We negotiated a temporary working space and an additional space on their property so that we could go ahead with the work. So to answer your question about if we're communicating with them, there will be additional communications going out after this presentation to talk to them about what will be happening in the next 12 months, what they can expect to see. The town has provided them additional site storage nearby their facility right now to I guess assist them in continuing their business operations while we move forward with this. It's our intention to keep them apprised of this change as well as we move forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm just going to add on to some questions for clarity with Councillor Meyer just brought up regarding in terms of the scope. I think it was mentioned that we're able to do this new what do we call it, rigid inclusion pilot project versus the DSM, MSM within the budget frame. So walk me back here 3 years from now, prior. If we're reviewing this the first time, is the DSM, MSM model cheaper or more expensive than the rigid inclusion pile? I ask that question is because just because we have a budget that we've approved, if the new technology or the new concept to resolve this would have been cheaper, is the contract just filling up the budget space and saying, well, we're just going to charge you the same, even though it could have been a cheaper fix?
Your worship, pardon me, I'm just unpacking the question a bit. So I believe there are two parts to that question. So the first part is if I were to compare the DSM method to the rigid inclusion wall, is there a cost savings between the two? If I can back it up even further, when we went out to proposals for the original scope that was outlined by the previous consultant, the DSM was considered a viable option given the information provided with the geotechnical that we had at the time. So it was, in effect, a more cost-effective and viable option given the information that we had to move forward with the DSM and MSM. I could not comment on the second part of your question of, at the time, would an inclusion wall that we're evaluating right now have been more cost-effective than the DSM. As we know more of the site's risks and circumstances now than we did before. Understanding those things presents that while the DSM would probably be still the cheapest option at the time, the inclusion wall is now the option that can deal with the circumstances that we are now dealing with, as was outlined by our consultants.
Okay. Councilor Fletcher?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I don't want to complicate this any more than what it sounds like we're complicating it, but having developed out in this area a number of times, this boil that you're talking about is very common. I actually drove out there and had a look as to what it is. And the same type of thing happened on a couple of properties that we've developed out there. And I'm wondering, how is it, so twofold to this question, how is it that when we built these ponds originally, would this have not shown? Because as soon as you turn back that layer of soil that's there, how did it get missed in the original engineering design of it? Second part of that question is, when they did the soil sampling out there, when we were talking about this a year and a bit ago, trying to figure out what it was that we needed to do, how was that not determined by SNC when they did their original engineering project? And I'm going to add one more third kink to that. So at the bottom of page 37, and it's been touched on by several people here, but I'm looking for very specifics, because you talk about suppliers and manufacturers advised of the project scope. So we've already given them detailed cost of doing this. What happens if they come back and tell us they cannot do this project? Because you've pretty much assured us here, sitting here, with what I'm hearing, is that they're going to be able to do this. However, with the uncertainties that they have now truly uncovered, and if you drive out there and have a look at the boils, there are several of them through this outset. And you can also see on the one wall where it's actually tearing apart the fences, and I'm suspecting that's where you have a bit of a work project going on there, because you're going to have to repair a fence and some yard space for an individual. How can you ensure this project will go ahead and be completed correctly without actually knowing the true need to do what we need to do out there yet? Sorry,
Your
that's
Worship,
a bit of a four-part question, and I apologize for that.
Well, that's, Your Worship, certainly thank you for the questions. I'm going to comment on the first one specifically. So, Your Worship, I think I provide Mayor and Council some advice that if we're going to speak clearly about 2008, what was known and what was not known, Your Worship, I would advise that we would be doing that in a closed session at this time. So I would ask that my staff just address question 2 and question 3. Question 1 specifically can be discussed at some point within a closed session.
Thank you.
Through your worship to Councillor Plechko. Pardon me, I was just trying to make notes of the questions, so I was trying to pay attention. For your second question, with how was this missed by the design consultant? So as council is aware, we did, the consultant did do a detailed preliminary review that included geotechnical considerations as well as groundwater. The preliminary review did include different types of geotechnical and groundwater testing, which included, test holes as piezometers and different types of geotechnical testing. It did outline, the preliminary engineering did outline risks of a confined aquifer, though it did not outline the extent of confined aquifer due to from the piezometers. It was not well understood as it was when we started peeling back the soils and started seeing the extent of the aquifer. I've been on a number of projects, Your Worship and Council, that you do a number of test holes, you do the best you can, and sometimes you still miss the big problem. I'm not here defending the rights or wrongs on this per se. We're just trying to provide clarity of what the reports gave us and how we move forward. As the contractor started to do the work out on site, the complexity of the hydrological conditions started to become a lot more clear of what we were seeing. So to answer your question about why our consultant missed this, I cannot answer for certain exactly, but we know now, and we're trying, and the redesign that we've worked with them on and impressed similar questions upon them that council is now asking us. We do feel is a solution that they've affirmed to us is the best path forward with what we see now, and which is why we are bringing it to council tonight. To your second question with the costs, and pardon me, I was writing this down. So your question, Councillor, was on affirming that the cost would be realized with the current risk that we see, and how are we going to ensure that? Part of the next steps that the engineering manager outlined within his, after we get through detailed design, is to do some test piles to see if they are viable prior to us implementing the full project. So those will happen early on or I guess later in the year of 2022. With that information, we'll be able to assess the further viability and decide if this is the path that we need to go on. As for the costs, your comments well-founded. I mean, with respect to the cost concerns, all indications that we've had with the contractor thus far have been amicable, and they've been trying to work with us on this as much as possible, given the circumstances. If the town felt at any point that there was a need to reassess our path forward with this contractor, there are options. Those are not things that I would like to outline here in council right now. But right now, it's been quite amicable and fortuitous for us to be working together to make sure that things that are being proposed to be built can be built in the timeframes that we're looking to do them within the budgets. I'll stop there, Your Worship and Councillor, if I've answered your questions.
Thank you for that. I appreciate the fact that you're working amicably with the contractor, but I also hear a bit of speculation within your voice that if something comes back that's actually more than what we need, there could be a possibility of costs changing, which means you may need to work with a different contractor.
Your Worship, through the Councillor Palechko, I guess you're correct. I mean, there's always there is an option for us there are contractual tools at our disposal to reevaluate things. We're never truly locked in, so to speak. However, given the circumstances and the timing and the budgets that we currently have in front of us, as well as the site conditions, and familiar with the area, as of right now, we're looking to continue our relationship with this contractor to make the best use of time and resources on both the town side and council's funding.
Any more questions, clear and understanding from members of council? I have a question for administration. So on this update, you're providing us an update and an option, which is the rigid inclusion pile versus the DSM because it does not work. What other options has administration reviewed with the contractors and engineers prior to bringing this forward? We don't need to know the details of every concept, but I just want to know the names of the concepts so that I can look at later and then reassure our residents that we did look at more than just one option.
Thank you, Your Worship, for the question. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but just for all of council's refresher, previous to the current consultant, we did procure a separate consultant to look at wall designs. Those were found to be, there were a number of different wall designs which I won't re-outline here. However, none of them were either financially or engineeringly practical to implement at the time, which is why the recommendation at the end of that was to relocate the pond. Once these new conditions surfaced and we started having discussions with the consultant about what other options are there, and put the task of the exact question you've just asked, Your Worship, about what else can we do. This was what they reevaluated the walls, and then we looked at is there another form of MSM DSM? Is there a different approach? Is there different things that we could do? That's where this rigid inclusion wall came from. They have internal experts that have seen similar problems like this, where this has been a successful design implementation. However, if the other option that is still available is to relocate the pond, I do want to emphasize that is not administration's first choice for a number of reasons, as there would be different cost implications, as well as to say nothing of relocating the pond could have an impact on, will have an impact on northern wetlands, as well as potential in the dog park. So that is still an option. It is not an option that we would like to go down unless we're absolutely certain. So it is, we brought it up in the presentation tonight, so as to say it is something that's there. However, in talking with the consultant, there is confidence behind this rigid inclusion wall, and which is again why we're bringing it to council for as an update as a path forward.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions from council? See, now I have another question for administration. So looking at this project, let's say this goes ahead, it's within the budget design, the scope and everything, it's completed. The design for the rigid inclusion wall is for the south side, the west side, and the far northwest corners. We all know from our time in, I think, elementary, water flows, and water will always go to the easiest route. So now we've created a wall that prevents water from going that direction and stuff. What's the risk of the other two sides of the wall that have not been done this rigid inclusion wall, the water migrating over there and sloughing that off, because that's the driveway and the parking lot of the dog park and the north side of the pond?
Your Worship, maybe a point of clarity that I don't think we've properly outlined in this presentation is that the rigid inclusion wall is porous, so it does allow for groundwater to flow through at certain locations. That is one of the reasons that that unlike the other walls that were previously considered, which were sealed, this particular type of wall with the piles allows for some water porosity across the entire stretch that is being considered. So it allows for the groundwater to freely flow, and without getting too technical and straight into the details, Your Worship, that's why this option is heavily considered to be the best path forward for this project. So to answer your other question about the risks to the other sides that are not currently scoped for this work, those sides have also recently been reconstructed and have proper surface drainage as well, as we did reestablish that culvert, and there are no current signs of any sloughing on those sides. The sides that we are focusing on are the ones that we either see some or a lot of movement, and which is why we're focusing on those areas.
Okay. And in terms of the larger picture with the Umbak storm pond, I know when we originally looked at the dog park and the storm pond, a lot of that water flows into that area, which is a low point. In consideration of, you mentioned surface water, of regrading the Umbak Dog Park so the water flows further away north instead of coming back, therefore hopefully taking some of that water pressure away if there's less water.
Your Worship, just for my clarity, if I heard your question right, you're asking if we should be regrading the dog park to go north towards the wetland as opposed to into the storm pond, and asking if we would be considering that?
Well, I'm just thinking, is that an option? If the problem is that we have the water pressure coming up from north, that area right now, that's a low point, that's why all the water comes there. If it's regraded, because one of the options was to move the storm pond, so if it was regraded a little bit so that some of that surface water does not immediately come into the pond, does that help the situation?
Your Worship, I'll have an answer for that, but I'll maybe ask if the engineering manager has anything further to add. The majority problem with that we're seeing out on this site is not strictly from a surface water problem. It is mostly having from the groundwater that we're seeing below ground, which is we could regrade the dog park to different directions if it made sense. However, the total area the water that would be coming in there isn't the most significant. I will tell you forthright, I don't believe that question's been asked about any regrading on the dog park side to help address that. But as we've gone through a lot of the discussions with the consultant, it is primarily the driver is that groundwater issue. And if the engineering manager has anything else to add to that.
Your Worship, I have nothing else to add, but I do share what Brett is saying, that A lot of the infiltration is through groundwater. We haven't noticed any, we've been out there several times towards the dog, in the dog park area in the vicinity on the north side and on the east side. We haven't noticed any issues with any sloughing on that side. The regrading of the dog park would, if we had noticed that there was maybe some concerns, it's something that we would look into. It would obviously drastically alter the appearance of the area, and we would definitely need to make sure that the grades are available in order to handle the influx of additional flow. And if the drainage is altered, like the general manager had identified that there is a wetland to the north, there would be permitting required from Alberta Environment to discharge that additional amount of water into areas that potentially might be sensitive.
Thank you. More questions? Okay. Seeing none, thank you. Councillor Anderson for the motion, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll move that council accepts the Umbek Stormwater Management Facility update for information.
Okay. Members of council, you have good questions and comments to the general manager and the managers to get some clarity and understanding of what's happening and occurring over at the Umbek Storm Management Pond. Any questions or debate on the motion for the accept for information for update? Okay. Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay. Thank you. We move on to 5.2, the addition of the cancellation of September 12th. Administration?
Your Worship, just a quick update here. So just in our own scheduling, that meeting looked very light. So our recommendation to council was to cancel the September 12th, and those items will flow into the 26th and thereafter.
Thank you. Councillor Hansard for the motion, please.
Your Worship, are we going to see the motion on the screen?
It's there right now, Councillor Hansard.
I'm just going to use that.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, I move that Town Council cancel the September 12th, 2022 regular council meeting.
Okay, thank you. Members of council, any questions, comments, and debate on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, move on to council discussion, information items, members of council. Anything that you need to update members of council on? Before that, we do that, as introduced earlier by our general manager, we have a new manager of engineering. Alex, would you like to? Right.
Your Worship, I apologize. I did excuse him. I apologize for my error in that.
Okay, no, maybe next time when he's, I would just like him to just introduce himself to council, a little bit of his history and stuff before he leaves, but we'll get them next time.
I apologize to Mayor and Council for my oversight on that.
Okay, moving into Deputy Mayor, start with you. Any council information and comments you want to make?
Thank you, Your Worship. Actually, just looking for an update from administration. Part of the last corporate plan approval was on conversion of previous lights that were along Main Street to solar and the installation of them in the Rotary Park as well as at our entry signs. I'm just wondering if we have an update on that project. I haven't seen any of that work commencing or heard anything really about it since it happened. So,
Your Worship, I guess I'll ask our general manager if he's aware of anything on the Rotary Park lights first, and then I can maybe speak to another side of that one. So.
Your Worship, I don't have any updates on that at this time.
Endeavor to find that out and get that out to council. I did want to, just along those lines, I'll maybe expand that a bit further. I know that council did provide direction to work on some Indigenous language welcome on the highway signs. We have put some time and thought and effort and so forth into those ones, Your Worship. We have reached out to some of our counterparts and within the Indigenous community around our area. And we have received some advice that we as an organization should work with their as I'll say, formal representatives to put a little bit of time and effort into some of the relationship side of that prior to having something installed, directly, so to speak. The reason I say that, just along the same lines, I heard you say highway signage, so I thought I would just provide that general update as well. So we do have some work to do on that one as well.
That's all for me this evening.
Anything else?
Nope.
Councillor Loynes?
Nothing today, Your Worship.
Councillor Pletchko?
Yes, thank you, Worship. I just want to say I've had an opportunity to drive around our community this summer, and obviously our administration and our teams that go along with everybody in the town office has done a lot of work with our local developers to see some new activity within our business parks. It's nice to see that we're starting to develop some of the lands out there, as well as the number of homes that are going up within our community. There's a lot of that, and I think that's kudos to our administration teams to thank them for getting that up and running. It's nice to see after a 2-year pretty much slowdown that we're back to some normality within our community. And then 79th Ave, it's nice to see that that's being done. But it might be nice to see our CPOs out there. That's still a bit of a race park going on out there. So if you want to set them up somewhere along the way to slow people down, that would be a great thing. There's some work crews out there, and they at times are troubled by a little bit of that. They've kind of taken a bit of control of that, and they've put 3 or 4 people along the way to slow people down. But not only that, it's the after hours when the crews are gone. It has now become a bit of a drag strip, and I think it's going to probably get a little worse once that is under full pavement. So just a note for everybody out there that it might be a good opportunity for us to sit in a few places that might slow people down. So not that I'm encouraging our enforcement people to do something that we shouldn't be doing, but at the same time, you might even catch me, so.
Your Worship, certainly thank you for those comments, and I know we can maybe try to get a little more presence out there. Your Worship, and I would just add further to Councillor Pletchko's comments, construction safety zones, what I would say over maybe the last 10 or 15 years have certainly become, there's good public awareness about the need to slow down, but Your Worship, I'm sure we all have a story or could mention a story of somebody that's moving pretty fast through a construction zone, and that is seriously dangerous. And I think, if Your Worship, certainly if we have an opportunity to get the message out about safe construction zones, I think we owe it not just to those individuals, but to our own staff who operate in those same environments. So Your Worship, we'll see if we can get some more presence out there to try to slow people down. It's a very dangerous thing for some people that are doing some very good work in our community. So,
thank you, Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just want to highlight an important event around the world, actually, that takes place this week, but is super important for us here in our own community. And that's World Suicide Prevention Day, which takes place September 10th, I believe. We've talked at length coming out of COVID and the importance of positive mental health and supports that are available. And so just want to highlight the supports that are available on the Town of Stony Plain website. There's lots of support there, but 211 is available province-wide. So if you know somebody or know anyone that is looking for support, 211 is a great resource to reach out. And let's, just always remember to look out for each other. And so just a great reminder this week, in recognition of September 10th. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Councillor Hampton.
Your Worship, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak this evening. This week, we saw the anniversary of the end of World War II when the Japanese signed a surrender on board the USS Nimitz and U.S. naval ship. And the world was rejoicing that we were now at the end of the big second war. We live in very precarious times right now, and we just ask for everyone maybe to be a bit aware that we can fall into war very quickly, and it takes a lot to get out of it, and to just be grateful that World War II did indeed come to an end, along with all the deaths of so many who died around our planet. Also, I wanted to say there's been quite a bit of discussion. I was approached by a few people in my neighborhood asking if the town has plans for what can be done around the creek beds and the areas that seem to have gotten so overgrown with, I don't know if any of it is noxious weeds or not, but there's a lot of stuff growing along the banks of Whispering Waters Creek and other places in town. And I know Public Works has been busy as always, and maybe struggling with a bit of understaffed numbers in order to get the work done. But do we just come to the end of summer, which by the way went by very quickly this year? Do we just come to the end of summer and trust that winter's going to kill off everything and then start over in the spring? And I'm just wondering, surely I'm not the only one, or the people I'm talking to are not the only ones that notice that we have what appears to be not very well kept areas around town. I don't believe they're intentionally not kept, but maybe we could be told, if not this meeting, another meeting, what some of the challenges were so that people could understand, and then it would be documented for the public to know what was going on this year that caused this overgrowth and the areas to not look as beautiful as Stony Plain has traditionally looked. So that's really all I have. Looking forward to Alberta Municipalities Conference coming up this month in Calgary and being part of the delegation who will go represent our community to the province.
Thank you for your questions, Councillor Hansard. I think administration will provide a little email update as well. I think just my first glance of looking at some of the overgrowth is definitely because of the weather conditions we've had. We've had a lot of moisture at the beginning of the season, so therefore it does grow. And along the creek, over quite a few years now that the creek is not cut all the way down to the creek, and it acts as a filtration and kind of a root system that holds the integrity of the creek itself. So that's one reason why it's not cut all the way down. But I would add to that, Councillor Hansard, I know our staff did just mow recently some areas of that, but they left a lot of grass there. Maybe that could be answered in that email is, I know we used to clean that up, so we used to have a turf sweeper or whatever that would go after to take some of that grass out so it wouldn't go into the creek system and clog the outlets and the culverts. And I was wondering if we're still doing that, and if not, just some conversation about why we changed that. Because I know we're trying to keep that free flowing.
Yeah, Your Worship, through Your Worship and Councillor Hansard, I'm happy to provide some of these answers in an email. I would have to look further into the collection of the grass question that Your Worship is bringing up.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not too sure if we did that, but I know we used to have a grass sweeper that would go after mowing the grass and sweep some of the areas up. And in terms of the amount of rain and the flooding that we've had over the last couple of years, I know that the more debris that goes in the grass clogs all the culverts, and therefore it causes more flooding hazards. Okay. That's everything, Councillor Hansard?
That's it.
Councillor Meyer?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Just very briefly, a tip of the hat to our CPOs and our fire department out there on the first day of school. I know that's always appreciated by the parents and the kids that are walking to and from school, just to get people back into the habit of slowing down and looking out for those kids. So kudos for that. That's all I got.
Thank you. I just want to tag along with what Councilor said regarding World Suicide Day. So on the 11th, this Sunday, the Rotary Run for Life is happening in our community. It's a walk, run, it's actually bringing dogs, and it's just to raise awareness and funds for coordinated suicide prevention. I think the more that we talk about it and bring it out into the light, the easier it is for us as a community to deal with mental health and awareness in the community. And if you like, I'll be there at 6 o'clock. Please join me because I'll be making breakfast for all the volunteers and runners. So I think if you signed up, great for you. If you didn't sign up, come earlier because that's when I'll be there. Okay, with that ends our council discussion. So moving on to 7 of our agenda item is a closed meeting regarding update to officials from our staff regarding the APPS, the Alberta Provincial Police Study. Just the members that are in our gallery and that are watching through our YouTube channel, is that there would be a motion to go in camera, and all the comments in there's no motions made in camera except for the motion to come out of camera. All business items that are done within Town Stony Plain are done in public. If you'd like to be notified when council comes out of closed session, you can definitely send an email to Ledge Services, or you can just leave your name as you walk out, and then you'll be notified and called to come back into chambers when we're ready. Okay. So with that, I need a motion to go in camera or closed session. Councillor Meyer.
Yes, Your Worship, I make a motion that that Town Council move into closed session to discuss per VoIP Section 24, Alberta Provincial Policing Study Update.
Okay, thank you very much. And before I call the motion, after it's carried, we'll take a 10-minute recess so we can allow members of staff that are not supposed to be in the closed session to leave, and allows the proper presenters to be in the closed session at that time. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Okay, that's carried. We have a 10-minute recess. Thank you. Okay, welcome back. We finished our closed session. The only motion that was made in closed session was by Councillor Loynes to move out of closed session, and that was carried 7-0. Members of the public and council, we're back into public hearing. To administration, did anybody registered to be notified when council came out of closed session?
No one registered, Your Worship.
Okay. Okay, with that, we can adjourn the meeting, so thank you very much. And just a reminder that we have canceled the September 12th meeting, so we'll see everybody the meeting after that, which is 26. Okay, we're adjourned.